Today is Sunday, September 18th, 2022. It is also day 426 of web dev and day 51 of JavaScript. And today the idea is to kind of make a card with this background image, and when I hover over it, an overlay with the pricing of that building should appear. So I'm going to try to do that with JavaScript. So the first thing I'll do is doc type HTML, and this just tells the browser, hey, I'm writing in HTML5. Then I'll put in my HTML tags and then my two main tags, which is my head and my body tags. So really, it's kind of easy to remember because you also have a head and your body tag. Not your head and a body tag, you also have a head and a body. And so just like in real life, nobody knows what goes inside your head, is the same thing in web development. Whatever information you put inside these head tags, your user is not going to see that. Only your computer does see that. The only thing your user is going to see is what's inside your body tag, which is going to appear on the screen. So I'll just start by putting this head tag right here. So it's really a meta tag. And what it says is the width of my screen, which is the viewport, should be equal to the width of the devices that I'm using. In other words, if I'm on my phone, the width of my screen of the site, of the website, should be equal to the width of my phone, right? So that's kind of has to do with responsiveness. So then the first thing inside the body tag, I'll just do a div and label it class container. And I'm only going to do one card. So um, no need for that much stuff. I'm going to target the container by using dot notation in CSS and giving it a border of 5 pixels solid and then black lined border. And then also give it a height of 100 VH, vertical height of the screen, so there's actual height to it. To remove the spacing, although surrounding the container, I'll use a star and then zero out any margin and padding that comes by default with some browsers, including this one. And then you won't notice here in the web, but if you go on your phone, you'll notice that even with just margin and padding zeroed out, there's still going to be, well, you did notice it, but there's still going to be some extra, spacing around it. So this kind of fixes that. And also, it kind of helps with responsiveness and, margin and padding later on. So I'll just go back in here, do a div, and I'll label it class card. And this is just going to be my card. And I'll go here to the card, and really I'll just give it a back, well, first of all, let me give it a height of, let's say, I don't know, 450 pixels, and then a width of 300 pixels for now, and then I'll give it a background URL, and I'll just go ahead and go here, right click, copy image address, and then paste that in there, and then that image should pop up right there. Beautiful. And then what I'll do is I'll do background size and set that to cover so that the image covers the entirety of the card, of its container. And then I would want the card to be at the center. So what I'll do is I'll go to the container and give the container a display of flex. And what that does is makes the container a flex container. And so anything in a flex container becomes a flex item. And so it falls under, or it's affected by any flex properties that I set in the flex container. So justify content center is going to move everything towards the center horizontally. So all the flex items, so the only flex item in this case is the card because that's the only thing inside the container, which is the flex container. And then align items center is going to center this vertically, and that's not going to work if you don't have a height. So if I remove this, it's not going to work because obviously you can see that it is going to work, but because it's the height is not 100% of the screen, it might look to you like it's not working, but it really is because it's still at the center. And the reason it's not where you want it to be is because really the height is ending like halfway through the screen. So height 100 VH, that's why I do that. And that's kind of pretty much it for the card. Now onto JavaScript. So the first thing I would want to do is access the card. So I'm going to give the card an ID of card just so I could access it. So I'll create a variable called card in JavaScript, and then I'll do document. So document is basically the DOM, the document object model. So why do we need this? Well, JavaScript is an object-oriented programming language, meaning it can only work with objects. And so your HTML elements are not objects. So what does your browser do? It makes a copy of your HTML page and converts those elements into objects. And that copy is called the DOM, or the document. And so now, because we have the document, JavaScript can now access those objects and manipulate them. So document dot, and then we can use functions like get element by ID, which is why I gave the whole thing an ID, and card, and this is just going to get any element, or in this case object, that has an ID of card. And to see if that worked, you could do console.log, which is the equivalent of Python's print. Save that, and you can do Control Shift I to open up developer tools, and you should see that the card actually appears in the console, so that means it's working. It's basically, just to make sure that it actually is selecting the card. All right, so now what I'll do is I'll go to HTML and I'll actually create the overlay first in HTML, and then I'll hide it and then make it pop up with JavaScript. So I'll actually maybe, I don't know, do I want to have it inside or outside the container? Probably inside. Actually, probably inside the card, actually. Let me try to do that. See what that looks like. So class overlay. I'm also going to give it ID of overlay. And then close that thingy and then go to CSS and then go down here and just say dot overlay, and I'll actually give it the same background. The only difference is that it's just going to have an overlay, and that's just a linear gradient. So it's a linear gradient and then comma, and then inside I'll just put in my color, so RGBE or RGBA actually 0.77 three times, and then 0.7, and I'll adjust that later. So let me go ahead and copy this and paste that there again. And then the reason we don't see anything at this moment is because the div itself, the overlay doesn't have a height or width. So I'm actually going to say height 100% and then width 100%. There we go. And then I'm also going to apply the same, let's say, properties that I applied, not properties, well, yeah, CSS rule that I applied earlier. So now it's kind of like an overlay. And then inside the overlay, I would want the price um, of the building to pop up. And then I'll say something, I don't know. Let's do 300, no, $456,000. Okay. So that's gonna pop up there. And let's see, the H1, I would have to say dot overlay H1 color white, font size. Let's say, I don't know. I mean, I think that's good. What is 40 pixels? Okay, I'll fix it later. And then to get it in the center, I'll just go to the overlay and give it a display of flex, and then I'll do justify content center, and then align items center. So again, display flex makes the overlay a flex container, and anything in a flex container becomes a flex item. And the only thing inside the container, the overlay, is the H1. So the H1 is a flex item, and now it has to follow these rules. So if I say justify content center, it's going to move all of the flex items inside the overlay to be in the center horizontally, and then align items does so vertically. So yeah, that's kind of it. And I think that's pretty much all I want to do. Maybe if I want to add a, I don't know, do I want to add a button? I could also add a button. I could do, I think there is a button tag, to be honest with you. I think there is, or maybe there's not. I don't really remember. HTML button. Yeah, there is. So I guess I'll do that. It's more, I'm trying to practice doing more semantic stuff. So, okay, and then in here, I guess I could do, I don't know, add or like purchase. I don't know. What do you can't just purchase a house. How would you say? Oh, like, I don't know, reserve a date to see. Like, I don't know, reserve a look. Let me just go and search up like I don't know, Zillow and see what they say. Um, buy a home. Okay, what do they say here? Oh, request a tour. Perfect. Okay, that's what I wanted. So I'll just go here and say request a tour. Okay, beautiful. And then, honestly, I don't even know how to style. I've never use, okay, I'll get to that later. So for the overlay, I obviously see that the money and the button are like in the same row, and I don't want that to happen. So I'll just change flex direction, which by default is row, to column so that all of the flex items are in the same column. And then what I could do is I could also do a grid. No, it's not grid, it's just gap. And then maybe do 2 EM, which is the equivalent of 30 something pixels. Maybe do 1 EM. That's equivalent of 16 pixels. Um, 2 EM would be 32. All right, and that just puts a gap in between the flex items. And then as for the button, I kid you not, let me see. I could do a button here because it's an element, so I could just target it like that. I could change the background. I'm not sure if I want to do, let me do border radius first. So border radius, let's do 50, not 50%, 20 pixels. Beautiful. And then padding, 10 pixels, top and bottom, 20 pixels left and right. Or maybe that's too much, not even sure. Okay, and then, I don't know. Do I want it to be in the middle or do I want it to be below? I think that's fine. Um, and then real quick, I'm gonna go to Google Fonts just so I can get a nice font for the text. I always use Lato. Oh, I already have it here. So let me just get these over here. I don't think, no, yeah, let me just import all of them because right now I just have Lato and Roboto Slab. So I'll go here to my code and I'll put this is a perfect use of the head tag. I'm actually going to put this inside the head tag. So really, you know how I always say this, but you know how your teacher in like high school always like asks where you got this certain information from, and like they would look at your citations and like where did you get this certain piece of information from, right? Same thing. CSS is looking for where you got a certain font from, and it's knowing where you got the font from because you're citing your sources in your head tag. So this is just basically saying, hey, this is where the font comes from. And then in CSS, you can now say, okay, I'm going to use this font family, which I'm actually going to get from here. I'm going to say Lato and put that in there. So now CSS is going to know where I get this font from. So that should change in a second. Let me see. Font. Let me see if I delete this real quick. There we go. Yeah, it changed. Okay, and then I would do the same thing for the 456, although I don't know if there's going to be a difference. I'm going to do Roboto Slab, and then go back. Where's my code? Okay, for the overlay, well, let's see what that ends up looking like. Maybe one more thing that I'll add is a hover state. So when I hover over the button, I would want the background to kind of change to this color, just kind of like a darker gray. So that's nice. And then, yeah, that's it. So then let me go to the overlay and give it a display none. Huh, display none. Oh, no way. Huh, it has a display flex, So because of that, I'm gonna have to create a new thing within it, like a div. Let's do div class content. Put that in here. So the reason it didn't work is because I have this as display flex. So let me just do um, dot content and really give it all of the display flex type of things and the height and the width as well. There we go. And then I can go here and make this display none, and then it should disappear. Beautiful. Okay, so now let's work with JavaScript. So again, I already have the card, but I would also need, I don't really need the card. What I need is the overlay. So let me just copy this and then call this the overlay. And then I believe I gave it an ID of overlay. So that's over here. And then really what I want right now is a function. So I'll do a variable and I'll call it on card. Oh, yeah, that's why I needed the card. On card hover. So when I hover over the card, I want the following function to happen. So I'll write what I want to happen here. So really what I want is I want the overlay, and I'll target its CSS, so style, and then its display. So that's a CSS property. And I want to set it equal to block so that it actually appears when I hover over the card. So That's literally it. And then to actually make sure this happens, because if I hover over the card now, nothing happens. So what I need to do is I need to get the card and then add an event listener, which is a function that takes in two things. The kind of like the thing that the card is looking for to happen, and that's like actually it's, let's say, I think it's mouse over. So when the mouse is over the card, it's going to call this following function on card hover, which is going to make the overlay display to block, which means it's gonna make it go from none to block, meaning it's going to appear. So really what this is saying is the card is listening, or it's looking for the mouse to be over it, and then when the mouse is over it, it's going to call this function on card hover. So now if I hover over it, you can clearly see it works. But then here's the problem. If I go off the screen, it's still like that, and that's a problem. I want it to be kind of on and off. So to fix that, I can create another function called, let's say, variable on card hover off. So like when I'm not hovering anymore, pass in a function and then go here and then say, okay, I would want the overlay to go CSS, right? Because that's how you target the CSS. The CSS property display that I want to change and set it equal to none again. So back to what it was, and really that's what I'm changing here. Oops. Where is it? Over here. This is what I'm changing. And then now I can do the same thing, add the card, add an event listener. And now instead of looking for when the mouse is over it, I think what it should look for now is when the mouse leaves. So mouse leave, and then it's gonna call this function. So when the mouse leaves off the card, it's gonna call that function. There we go. So now it's working and it's pretty nice. Um, yeah, and that's it for today, really. Um, maybe just to make some little things a little bit nicer, I can just give the card, I don't know, a border radius of 20 pixels, so it's like round. And then I could also have it be, I don't know, oh, I would also have to do the overlay to have a border radius of 20 pixels if I want that to happen. Beautiful. All right, and that's kind of it for today, and I'm gonna go now. Bye.